Christmas might be 169 days away, but some NBA teams found themselves with presents and others with coal. As the initial wave of free agency is over, we see teams who have suddenly increased their chances at winning a championship and others who look to be in the Andrew Wiggins race for 2014. I'm joined by Brian Coyle, Andrew Park, and Max Scheinberg as we break down the biggest winners and losers of this free agency period. Let's start with our West Coast expert, Andrew Park. Andrew, what can you tell us about your biggest loser and your biggest winner so far?
Well, first of all, let's go with the bad. My biggest loser right now is the Boston Celtics. Let's see what happened. They were gutted of their big three. First, it all started with Ray Allen going with the Heat a year ago, and then again this year they traded away Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce for a couple of mediocre players. I mean, they have Gerald Wallace, who has won a terrible contract. He still has 3 years, $33 million left on that for being a really underwhelming stretch four or maybe a big three man. It wasn't really that good of a deal. They gave away a lot, and they're quote unquote rebuilding, but they're still over the cap for this season, and they'll be right at the cap next season. So for me, this offseason hasn't been very good. Danny Ainge keeps on saying that, you know, we're the Celtics, we don't rebuild, but come on, let's be honest. It's going to look a lot different, especially with the new face of the Celtics franchise in their new head coach, Brad Stevens. They're in complete rebuild mode, and they've been completely gutted. And right now, I think they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to be in the top 8 at all. As for my winner, I'm going to take the lovable New Orleans Pelicans, not the Hornets, but the Pelicans. They made a huge splash after drafting Nerlens Noel at number 6 in the NBA draft. They traded him for the point guard that they needed, the true star point guard that they really needed ever since Chris Paul left and bolted for the Los Angeles Clippers in the trade a couple years ago. And Jrue Holiday is an all-star. That is a fact. He is one of the best pure point guards. One of my personal favorite players. He was the only one on the Philadelphia 76ers team that did anything, and he just had a lot of lackluster talent around him. And now that he's on the Pelicans, he gets to play with Anthony Davis. The Pelicans also signed Tyreke Evans to a huge contract, who I think is going to do really, really well with them. I mean, Tyreke Evans has always showed a lot of potential. He had a great rookie year, winning Rookie of the Year. As far as everyone knows, he's a poor man's LeBron. I mean, he does everything well. He needs to work on his jump shot, but I think right now with a lineup of Jrue Holiday, Eric Gordon, Tyreke Evans, Anthony Davis, with Ryan Anderson coming off Ryan Anderson at the 4, I think that's a really, really strong lineup, and I think the New Orleans Pelicans are the next biggest young team to rise up the ranks.
Wow, so Andrew Park, to recap, has the Boston Celtics as the biggest loser, even though they did pick up a winner in Brad Stevens as their new head coach. Now Max Scheinberg joins in with us all the way from Florida. Now Max, who are your biggest winners and losers of this offseason?
Well, piggybacking off of what Andrew said, the team that made the trade with the New Orleans Pelicans was the Philadelphia 76ers, and they traded away their best player. This is a guy that was a former All-Star in Jrue Holiday, and he was extremely consistent and successful in Philadelphia. And they got back a huge question mark in Nerlens Noel. Yeah, he was extremely talented in his limited experience in his only season at Kentucky, but he didn't really prove much. And you never know with these ACL injuries when they're going to be able to make it back to the court. They still have Evan Turner, who he's very inconsistent. He's talented, he's versatile, but you never know what you're going to get out of him. You hear his name in some trade rumors, and that team, it's just like Andrew said, they might be a team that's looking at be in the Andrew Wiggins race. They drafted Michael Carter Williams out of Syracuse, who, to me, he was overrated in college, and he was drafted high due to his exceptional play in the NCAA tournament, which it's good to play well under the big lights, but I don't see him translating well in the NBA. In terms of my biggest winner, you got to go with the Los Angeles Clippers. That team has added, and they've kept their talent and they've added talent. They kept Chris Paul on a 5-year, $107 million contract. You could say he kind of took the hometown discount $11 million less than he could have got of the max. But they brought back Matt Barnes at a 3-year, $11 million contract. That's a guy that shot 46.2% from the field and averaged over double digits. He's an underrated player who is an excellent defender that can cover all of the franchise players around the league. Another guy that they just brought in was Darren Collison, a guy that a more than reliable backup for Chris Paul, who has proved to be explosive at times and at other times inconsistent. But he's a guy that I look for to do big things in his limited playing time. Another guy you hear rumors about the Clippers potentially adding is Antoine Jamison. It's another veteran to add to that locker room, some more experience, and if they can get that deal done, it's another guy that can add some depth to that team in their quest to make a championship run behind new head coach Doc Rivers.
Right, so the LA Clippers, after acquiring Doc Rivers as their new head coach, seem to be looking at a new high water mark. Meanwhile, the 76ers, Michael Carter-Williams of Syracuse, actually just dropped 25 or 26 points in the Summer League. But of course, it is just the Summer League. Now with me, I have Brian Coyle, who's coming in live from Miami. Brian, what can you tell me about your biggest winner and your biggest loser?
Both you guys started off negative, so I'm going to go on the positive side here and talk about the Indiana Pacers. Now, a lot of you guys are probably thinking, the Pacers really didn't add that much. Why are they my winner? You keep David West. This was a team that took the Miami Heat to 7 games. So you add the biggest problem with them was depth. You add a good point guard like C.J. Watson instead of D.J. Augustine. Really couldn't handle the pressure at sometimes. Watson was great with the Bulls 2 years ago. He was decent with Brooklyn. I think he's going to come back and have a much better season. You add a pure scorer in Chris Copeland, formerly of the New York Knicks, who literally is just going to go out there and shoot the ball. Yeah, I know, Max, you're hurting about that, but and then I think you didn't really need to, the good teams don't go out and splash the cash in free agency. They go out and with the Heat being the exception, a lot of teams are built with consistency. So I think the Pacers are good there. And on the downside, I have to go with the Dallas Mavericks. You lose your starting point guard in Collison, Max mentioned before. You signed Jose Calderon on a 4-year deal. He's 31 years old and has never really stood out to me as one of the league's top point guards. And then basically you strike out again in free agency. You make the pitch to Dwight Howard, doesn't happen. Last year you did the same thing with Darren Williams, doesn't happen. Dirk Nowitzki's getting hung out to dry out there. And how many years are you going to do this to Dirk before he's going to get pissed off and want to leave? They literally broke up the 2011 championship team to do this, to set up this big free agency bonanza with Mark Cuban, and it just hasn't worked. So I have to put the Mavericks as my loser.
To me, I'd say the Pacers are a loser. I think Copeland showed some promise in his time with the Knicks down the stretch. He was hitting the open three. But, you talk about them bringing back David West. Yes, that was a must. That was a priority. But if you want to beat the Heat in a 7-game series, adding Chris Copeland is not going to get that done. The guy, all he can do is shoot. So for a team that lost in 7 games, Chris Copeland and bringing back David West doesn't put them over the top.
Yeah, but the thing is with Copeland, they're not going to ask him to do that much. They're going to ask him just to shoot. Then they're going to fill out the rest of their thing. But we haven't talked about, the one guy we haven't talked about is Dwight Howard in Houston. Chough, you're our expert when it comes to the Rockets. What do you think? Are they a winner? Are they a loser? Are they somewhere in between? What do you think?
Are they a winner in that this makes them a championship caliber team? Not necessarily, but it does make them better. I've never been Dwight Howard's biggest advocate, but in Houston, he's not going to be asked to do what he did in Orlando because they already have a face of the franchise, and that guy's name is James Harden. The two guard who was one of the best top 10 players in the league last year. And now he's surrounded by Dwight Howard. You got Omer Asik backing him up because it looks like Houston doesn't want to trade him. But if you do have him, that's 48 minutes of rim protection. You got 3-pointers all over the place. You got spacing for your big men. So it could work for Houston. I could see them maybe being a top 4 team behind the likes of top 4 in the West, excuse me. Top 4 behind the San Antonio Spurs. You got the Oklahoma City Thunder. You have the LA Clippers. And then you got the Golden State Warriors and the Houston Rockets vying for that 4th spot. But I can easily see them being a top 4 team in the West. So,
I just want to bring up... Oh, sorry.
No,
Okay.
that's fine. Andrew?
Yeah, I just want to bring up a point back when we're talking about the Indiana Pacers. I think what Max and Brian forget to mention is that Danny Granger's coming back from injury, which I think is going to be huge. He's a very humble player. He's not one of those who must start like an Allen Iverson. Used to say how he would never come off the bench. So I think the Pacers, and then they're technically gaining Danny Granger back, and that's what they needed. And Granger is more than happy to give the reins up. I mean, he knows this is Paul George's team now, and he's more than happy to be that 6th man, that scoring punch that they really lacked. And I think with a bench of Granger, Copeland, Watson, that really solves their inefficiency last year to score while their starters were on the bench.
Andrew, who's to say, when has Danny Granger come out and said
Hey Max, we're hearing from our producers that we're kind of short on time right now. So I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut you off there, but we're definitely going to have more Pacers talk in the coming future. And while Danny Granger might not be the answer per se, having a guy come off injury is just like a free agent in itself. Now, next year's 2014 free agency might be a lot more star-studded than this, but nevertheless, this one is going to have ramifications for the upcoming season. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe. Just click the button right over here. Be sure to leave a comment below. Follow us on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook. All the links are down below. And until next time, stay tuned.